Welcome to the very first episode of Life Vision Lab podcast, the space where we explore fresh ways to gain clarity, align with purpose, and transform how we live and lead. I am your host, Shwetha, and I'm so excited to start this journey with you. Today, I'm joined by Andrea Skitch, a seasoned psychotherapist, spiritual teacher, death doula, and the founder of the Aquarian Academy. Andrea is known across North America for her dynamic, multidimensional approach to mental wellness, grief, and trauma recovery, and of course, leadership. She brings decades of experience bridging modern psychology and science with ancient wisdom teachings. In her Toronto practice, Andrea supports clients through personalized transformative therapy. She also partners with organizations to reduce burnout, improve morale, and bring trauma-informed leadership training to life. On a personal note, Andrea is a wife, a mom to a 12-year-old son and a 10-month-old puppy, and she's healed from two chronic autoimmune disorders and PTSD using the same techniques she now shares with her clients. And we're diving into a very important conversation: how therapy, spirituality, and community can help us navigate different stressors in life and be better leaders with more resilience and clarity. Andrea will also share how we can begin to heal from the inside out and create an environment at home or at work where well-being is the norm. Hello, Andrea. I'm so glad to have you here today, and even more grateful that you agreed to join me for our very first episode on the Life Vision Lab podcast. And I remember when I first met you a few years ago, I was in a very different place. I felt exhausted, overwhelmed, and honestly, I didn't even know how to articulate any of those feelings inside. I didn't want to talk about it. I just want to feel okay. And that's why I think for me, this conversation and this podcast is so important, because a lot of us feel this way, but we just don't know who to turn to and where to get the support. And so today we're going to dive into different ways of therapy and supportive practices can help people who feel like I did back then. People who may not have the words yet, but know that they want things to change. And so I know, Andrea, you've worked with a lot of people, but I want you to start off by talking a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Thank you, Shwetha. It's so awesome to be here with you. It's an honor to be on your podcast and just to know you. You're a really special person and you have a huge heart and you have such a beautiful influence. So thank you for having me. And it's just a joy to know you. A little bit about me: I have a psychotherapy practice. I've had it for over 15 years. And I primarily work with adults, mostly women, although I do work with men as well. Women who are in positions of leadership and they want to feel better. They want to have a better relationship with their body, with their partner or their family or their children, or with their work. And a lot of that requires us to remove some of the gunk, right? All the limiting beliefs and the experiences that kind of gnaw on us. So the work I do is really about cleansing anything that is getting in your way of you feeling really strong and powerful, which is actually the truth of who you are. I'm also a consultant for organizations who want to create better environments for their leadership team and for their staff around mental health. It's that work helps people recover from burnout and reduce the possibility of burnout and create a better environment that's more conducive for better work and better health, because organizations are also places where people can heal. Of
That's
course.
such a wonderful thing you pointed out, Andrea, and I do want to unpack that a little bit later in the podcast as we progress, because I do work in the corporate world and in a very large organization, and I have always worked in very large organizations, and I have the pleasure and the honor of leading some large teams. So for me, it's ever so important to not just bring my best self forward, but to make sure that my team brings their best self forward and not have to sacrifice or compromise their own values as they do that. So I do want to unpack that at some point.
Yeah.
And what inspired you to pursue this path of becoming a therapist?
I'm of the belief that we come into this life with certain gifts that we're meant to share, we're meant to amplify for other people and for the betterment of everybody and for the planet. And there are clues, I think, from your childhood that point to what these gifts potentially can be. For me, growing up as an empath and as a highly sensitive person, being very aware of the emotional states of the people around me, I grew to learn that those sensitivities are a gift. They help me connect with people, read through the lines, and create experiences for people that uplift them and make them feel good. Growing up as an HSP, as probably some of your listeners are, is not an easy thing.
What is an HSP?
Sorry, a highly sensitive person. And if you are an HSP, you already know what I'm talking about. You're the person who you're deeply affected by, what you hear on the news, or maybe you emote more easily than other people. You can sense if there's essentially
Hmm.
good vibes or not good vibes going on there.
You realize there's this energetic field that you have that can sense all of this, right?
Yes, exactly. We don't, because it's something that happens from birth for most of us, right? We don't
Mhm.
have the language for it. We just sense it. On my journey, figuring out these are some of the areas that I excel, I needed to figure out how to make that a positive experience, not a negative experience. The negative experience for an HSP, or for all of us, really, all of us really have these sensitivities. It's just people who consider themselves highly sensitive are just more in tune, right? With
Mhm.
sensitivities, but all humans are sensitive. So the negative side of having that sensitivity or not knowing how to harness it is a lot of imbalances in the body mind system and just not feeling good, absorbing other people's energy without knowing how to relieve yourself of it or process it or channel it. A lot of negative thoughts can really be heavy on all of us, but sensitive people in particular. Physical ailments. So you were asking about my journey. I did grow up with a couple of inflammatory disease diagnoses, and navigating that was really challenging, as anybody knows who has chronic health issues. And
Mhm.
it was on my own healing journey and discovering some of the techniques and strategies that helped me made that it was those challenges that made me realize how my body was storing negative energy essentially. And I'll just put in a little pro tip here. When I say energy, I am talking about emotions. So
Mm.
emotions, emotion, energy
Mm.
and motion.
A good way of putting it.
We want to think about letting energy slash emotions move through our system without blocking them. That's ultimately what we are going for. Everybody benefits from having that skill. So, all that to say, I've had lots of bumpy moments in the road, like any human, but it was those challenges that have revealed how I can not only heal myself, but then also create a healing experience for other people's systems to heal. I don't heal, they heal. I just create an environment for their system.
Beautiful. And we're all very lucky to have you in our life, Andrea. So appreciate that honesty and a very clear explanation around what emotion is. That's the first time I've never heard that before. So that's amazing. And then the second thing you mentioned was, which we'll unpack a bit more, is around how to make space for your emotions not to be blocked, right? And that's the piece we'll get deeper into as we get into the conversation. That was so insightful and so personal. And thank you, because we don't get to hear someone actually share something so deeply personal and change the narrative and alchemize it into something beautiful like what you do. So what would you say have been the most rewarding aspects of choosing this particular line of work?
What a nice question. The more I do this work, the more I see a couple of things that get me really inspired. Number one is I really believe that women are called to be the leaders of this new era. We're designed for it. We've got the goods. We've got this complex, beautiful auric system. One of the yogic teachings is that a woman's aura is 16 times stronger than a man's.
Mm-hmm. Two.
Say that we're better, or both men and women, or the masculine and the feminine. This doesn't have to be specifically gender, but
Mm-hmm.
those energies that run through us, they are both equally as powerful as each other, but in different ways. So I'm just talking about specifically the feminine aura right now. And
Specifically of the feminine aura because it's been suppressed for centuries, and now is the time we actually liberate ourselves and come out and shine.
thank you for saying it that way. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. And so a lot of women are moving through a lot of their healing journey right now. A lot of women go to therapy, which is wonderful, or they're doing somatic practices and yoga or Tai Chi, or they're going to retreats. We've got this wonderful movement, this mental health movement. And the men, God bless them, they're on their own journey and we need them to be on the journey too. But I'm just speaking right now to the women. We are really equipped to be the leaders of our time because we are able to influence people around us positively or negatively, depending on where your attention is flowing, by the way. And without this sort of, people talk in mainstream culture right now a lot about hustle and how we're
Mhm.
dropping the whole hustle culture. I believe that's because we're stepping more into a feminine leadership era, but we're just on the cusp of it, right? So there's lots of evolution and growth to be done. And I think women, we really need to realize that there's a responsibility that comes with being a woman. And we have to work through a lot of the martyr energy that is a result of this oppression that you talked about. It's very real. Lots of ridiculous things have been put on women. We have a lot of things to undo as a society in terms of how we care for women and how we approach women.
We
But
get a bit deeper on that, Andrea. Can we have an example around how to get away from the martyr energy in day-to-day living?
yeah,
And how do we influence change on how to be more supportive towards women? And I don't mean um, tokenism. I don't mean giving women a seat on the table because you think you need a woman on the table. I mean it because you now embrace that woman to bring all her glory and
mhm,
influence the change that you'd like to see that a woman bring to the table. Me
yeah.
examples.
So that's a two-part
Two.
question.
Yes.
So help me remember the second part because I'll go back to the first part, which
Mhm.
is how do we deal with the martyr energy or the martyr pattern?
Yes.
It is real that for the last 2000 years or more, women have been put in a position where they have had to carry the wellness of the family, of the tribe, of everybody without getting the true sort of acknowledgement and support and recognition and respect and reverence,
Hmm.
right? And just any experience where a group of people are oppressed, that becomes an internalized belief that we don't either deserve that kind of nurturing or reverence or acknowledgement. And then that turns into this deep rage and resentment. And rage and resentment are the two, I would say, largest emotions when we talked about emotions, energy in motion that are stuck that I see in women because there's no safe place to express those emotions
Hmm.
or to process them in a
Which
way.
then leads to bitterness, negativity, and eventually giving up on all they wanted in life, right?
Yes, because what happens is those energies they put you in a collapse position in your
Mm.
nervous system. And then from a collapsed nervous system comes what's the point? What's the point? Why do I bother? It's all on me. And these are valid feelings. Any woman who's hearing me who experiences this, I want you to know that it's okay to feel that way. What I'm suggesting is that there's beauty in creating a space to really acknowledge those feelings and having tools and strategies, which we'll come to, about how to process those feelings because you don't get much out of life if you carry around a lot of rage and resentment. It leads to depression, it leads to anxiety, it leads to just feeling stuck and wondering where your purpose is. So these are the side effects of being in a less than optimal state of being for anybody. But again, I'm speaking to women specifically.
It almost gives permission now for people to start looking inward, right? At least for me, that's what this journey has helped me, listening to people like you and others who I've met through my own healing journey. It's given me permission to recognize that it's okay to sense and feel the resentment. It's okay to be bitter about things. But now it's about, once that awareness is brought to it, how do you alchemize it and then find the path to compassion and love, and then eventually to manifest your desired outcome. And so it's that beautifully said, Andrea. Thank you. And when we talk about rage resentment for women, I know women, and again, coming back to specific examples around being a martyr, is it, can we say, we go into work, we obviously are in very strong leadership positions today, a lot of women in strong leadership positions, but we still have a lot. We think about, what's the food going to be on the table? How do we get the dishes done? How is the laundry done? These are just everyday mundane activities that we constantly have in the back of our mind. So, how would you say we shift that thinking to free up our energy? Because all of this is energy work too, right? It drains you when you have multiple tabs open, just like your computer gets drained one day. So, what would you say? How can people move from being a martyr mentality into being empowered?
I love your analogy of the tabs being open. That's absolutely true. And yes, a woman's mind usually, because she's in tune with not just herself, but her tribe or her group, her family, whatever is in her world, she has her finger on the pulse of what everybody needs. Like, that's part of how we're designed. So it's very real to have mental load and to for that to take energy. What I've observed is that, okay, there's two things I want to say about this. One is, you want to find a way that works for you in a very efficient way to add energy into your system. Okay. So the yogic teaching, of course, around this is about prana. We want to add prana to the system. And that's why I use Kundalini yoga, something I haven't brought up in the conversation yet, but that I love and I use personally and I also teach. Add some technique. And for me personally, it's the Kundalini yoga, but there are other ways too. Adding prana to the system. What does that mean? Or another word is chi, right? From Chinese medicine.
Mhm.
So it's this idea that our system, the breath of life flows into our system and nourishes us on the breath. And so when we use breath practices, very specific ones that are designed for the human body, which is why I like Kundalini yoga so much, then we can really, almost the same way you have a coffee and you feel that little boost of energy, adding prana to the system really helps you have more energy to move through the day and to also ride above some of those emotions as well. So it's very practical, right? And
Mm.
some of the breath work that I teach is 2 minute long practice, three
Mhm.
minute long, like super short, but super powerful. So that's point number one. But the other thing is going back to allow processing your emotions and learning how to relate to them. The point is, if you don't give yourself that opportunity, then you get a little bit stuck and we get attached to our emotions. Like our brain starts to tell us that it means something about us. And then what's lacking in that moment for a woman is her creative capacity to handle the whole system. So
Mhm.
it's coming into the CEO position of your life rather than being an employee of your life, right? When you're in the employee status or state, you feel like things are happening to you, right? You feel like you're just working for somebody else
Mm.
when you just go to bed tired and you do it all over again. But that's not fun. It's not a,
Mhm.
that's not a great way to be. So if you have enough prana and if you have some practice or some experience like therapy or and then you learn skills from that and you have some way to process your emotions, you get to a state where handling all the puzzle pieces in your mind becomes so much easier and your creative brain, your creative ideas and your adaptive brain, your frontal lobe right here,
Mhm.
it's figuring out what's the easiest path.
So often the answer is right in front of you, but because you had all these tabs open and focused there, you couldn't even see what was. I've firsthand experienced this, Andrea. And what I really liked in what you said is how we need to give time to understand our emotions. And I can speak from personal experience that I never gave it time. I would push it away and let's move on to the next task. So, yes, I was being productive. Yes, I would achieve a lot of things, but I kept ignoring certain emotions where one day it showed up as rage, like you said, resentment. For me, it was more of a pause and look at my life and say, am I happy with what I've created? Do I want more? How can I be in a state of being, not doing, and still make things work for me? Because that's what we are. We are human beings. We are not human doings. And this world keeps pushing us into doing more. And like you said, we need to move away from that hustle culture, right? And that hustle culture is so deep in so many parts of our life that it doesn't give you that space to really recognize and say, I am feeling guilty because I didn't put food on the table today. Does it mean that I ignored it, or was I actually busy doing something else for the family so I couldn't do it? And I remember you had said something so beautiful to me when we met in our initial conversation. You need to become your best friend. No one outside of you
That's great.
can be your best friend. And we women tend to, as part of the martyr mentality, the flip side is also how critical we get of ourselves, right? We become our
Mhm.
own worst enemy. So, coming back to the second part of the question,
Yep.
how do organizations make it comfortable for a woman to have a seat on the table? Because she's not just finally showing up as
Mhm.
a leader because she's got the seat on the table, but it's generations of work that she's now trying to heal when she has that seat on the table. Because many years of women not having a seat on the table, being suppressed, is what we now, and I'm lucky to be on that table and I do it in every small little way I can. But what would you say are the first steps that any organization or a leadership team can take when you have a woman on the seat of the table?
Such a great question, Shwetha. Oh my gosh. What can an organization do? It does come down to having a certain reverence for the feminine, right? And basically appreciating it just as much as we appreciate the masculine energy, which is about action and planning, right?
Mhm.
Having conversation in your organization about, you don't have to use this language, but I'm just using it to describe feminine and masculine energetics or the benefits. Any single human has both feminine and masculine aspects to them. Even the men in an organization benefit from understanding that, right? Like the more intuitive, the take it slower process. This is the
The
feminine,
nurturer.
the nurturer, the creative, also the sparking of something, right? Like
Mhm.
really the creators, like the womb space, right? That's the feminine. And then the action and the planning and the execution and organizing is the masculine. So, conversations about how both of those phases are really important. And then recognizing that in your employees and obviously in your female employees in particular. Because again, we might need a little bit more permission in the workspace to embody some of our feminine qualities because they've been dismissed for so long, right? Like having an intuitive feeling about something. Like
Mhm.
explore that with your employees, explore that on the team in your conversations. Not just what can we do about something, but what is our intuition telling us about it? Or how do we envision something going? These are the feminine qualities, right? Conversations about the energetics can really help using language that's appropriate for your group.
Mhm.
And then it's no surprise that this whole phrase of imposter syndrome popular right now. And people resonate with that. They're like, oh yeah, I
Mhm.
know the feeling of imposter syndrome, which my understanding of it is that it's this feeling that you somehow don't belong in a room and that you don't have the goods. Is that your understanding of
And
it?
yes, and somehow miraculously you've landed there. And then you say, I'm lucky, and someone just found me along the way. But all the while knowing you actually had the goods in you, and that's why you've got it. So
Yeah.
for me, it was massive imposter syndrome. And I remember I had a very good leader back then who helped me overcome that, where she said, you have no idea the strengths you have and what you bring on the table, and I need you to be more confident as you embody the leadership position. And so I love that you brought up because people resonate with imposter syndrome and we use it loosely in conversations, but I think there's a deeper aspect to it, right? If we look within ourselves.
Exactly. I'm glad you had, so that's a great point you're pointing out. So you had a beautiful mentor, somebody who reminded you of your power. So
Mm-hmm.
women supporting women is key. We women are, first of all, we don't live in a society that promotes women gathering.
Mm.
We don't gather as women.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about, just like intuitively, if you think about that, there's a huge loss for women. We really need each other. Men need men too. I'm being like heteronormative here, but please just understand I'm talking energetics as well. Women need women. Women need to gather. That's where we share a lot of wisdom and a lot of support. Tend and befriend is the natural inclination for the feminine. So, given that's been stripped of our culture, and no surprise, that benefits somebody, not us. Women supporting women in an organization is really key and really helpful. Reducing the amount of complaint, criticism, and comparison within yourself as an individual and within yourself as a leader is paramount.
I'm sure the listeners are going to wonder, how do we do that every day?
Yeah. So it's just bringing your awareness to how much of my day am I spending complaining,
Mm-hmm.
criticizing, which is also that internal critic that you mentioned earlier, Shweta, and comparing myself or comparing other people. Right? So those are really the three C's that are going to create, that are really going to take energy from you. So as a leader, or even as an, all people are leaders. Like we
You
talk
don't
about,
have to be a leader. You
thank you.
can show up as a leader every day where people look at you and say, wow, I'm inspired. And it could be someone just even being a customer care support specialist. It could be someone just doing a data entry job, but it's just what you embody and how you embrace that work and bring your best self forward. It's what you bring your, how you bring your best self forward and how you are vulnerable about some of the challenges you're internally going through to then be open to getting support as well.
And that is important for everyone to hear, that it's leadership is a state of being. It has nothing to do with
Mm,
having followers or a team.
mhm, mhm,
So I just want to say one little caveat though for the women out there who we do, there's one exception to the complaint point that I made, which is that when women gather, we do need to gab a little bit. There's like a couple processes that actually happen for women and not for men. So we have to vent a little bit with each other. That's part of the bonding.
My husband always, when I'm either speaking to my mother-in-law, my mom, my sister, some of my friends, he's even before you got the crux of it, you'll spend 45 minutes just talking about things, and it's that's the way we process it, right?
Yeah, there's always a little bit of room for that
And
complaint.
having, I think I have incredible friends around me. I have a very good community around me, Andrea, and I think it didn't happen overnight. I think it was very intentional, very purposeful. It's about understanding what I can bring forward as value as well with these individuals, and sometimes maybe not. Sometimes it's just hanging out and not expecting something of each other. I think we don't do enough of that even at work because everything is so transactional today, given everything
Oh,
is hustle culture. There's this constant pressure that what am I going to bring on the table? How am I going to connect? And that then gets you to spiral mentally and in turn impacting your nervous system. It's always so lit up all day because you're setting such high expectations of yourself that at some point it's going to you burn out.
yeah, said exactly. Yeah. And that's because we still live in a culture that still is very much like in the mind. We still spend a lot of our day in our minds,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like trying to figure things out. In therapy, I work with everybody has what I call not just me, I don't, it's not just from me that I call it this way, but it's from internal family systems, Richard Schwartz. But we have different parts of us. And
Mm-hmm.
most of us have a manager part, the part that
Mm-hmm.
is used to figuring out and making sure that our ducks are lined up so that things go well and so that we can avoid any kind of disaster or pain real or perceived. And our manager parts are really beautiful parts. We want to honor that part. However, it's a very mental part. It gets exhausted and, like you said, leads to burnout. And it doesn't know how to do something which I want people to really hear, especially again, talking to the women here. When you learn how to get more into that state of beingness that you were talking about, the you have this whole 10 body system that can actually magnetize opportunities and outcomes
Mhm.
to you, right? Versus making it happen, versus the action only, not that we don't have to take action, but versus this other posture, which is it's what we call age. It's like this is the age is gone, is this action oriented, action equals results. But I'm talking about what in particular what women, but this influences everybody, what we need for balance and mental health balance is to not only be in our manager posture, but also to balance that with an embodiment posture, let's call it that, an
Mhm.
posture, really working with the energetics in your system. And then it does allow you to be in a place where things come to you.
I think it's more being aware of how you've experienced it. For me, at least, that's how I had to train my mind to finally start seeing pockets of my life where some of the best things happened. Literally, when I wasn't trying hard, I wasn't forcing an outcome,
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
pushing for something to happen, I wasn't running away from something.
Yeah.
It was all about, I have done everything right.
Yeah.
I have integrated my value system. I have integrated my best self forward. Now I'm going to let the universe work its magic and let the right opportunities come to me. And again, it's something that you got to train your mind to see. And you cannot see it if you have all that chaos in the head going on. And so now I want to move and shift gear a little bit,
Mhm.
Andrea, into what are the different types of therapy and modalities that people can use. I've experienced and gone through a few, which we
Mhm.
can cover as we go into the conversation, but many people have a general idea of therapy. It's like speaking to someone, and they don't often understand the different modalities. So I want you to
Yeah.
explain the approaches you use and why you choose them, because the most obvious excuse I've heard, for the lack of a better word, is, oh, therapy is just talking to another person, and
Yeah.
I just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and what's the whole point? It's like you're complaining to someone else about your life.
Yeah. Said. And thanks for pointing that out. And there's some validity in that. It's valid. I think we sense that that where your attention goes, energy flows. We've heard that phrase before, right? So we
Yes.
know that you can massage a problem and almost amplify it, right? You can amplify a negative experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that's not good, right? We don't want to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
very valid point, right? Why would I go sit down and talk to somebody and just rehash my problems that are already a problem? Makes sense. However, put a pause on that and I'll come right back to that. For me personally, after the birth of my son, he's now 12 and a healthy kid. We did have some challenges during his birth, and not so much for him, but for me. I had some health issues, and it was a very difficult road after his birth. Yeah, I knew because I'm in the profession, but I had not experienced a brain based therapy yet. I'd only experienced talk therapy up until that point. I had this education that trauma, which is what I had experienced, lives in the body. It doesn't live in your mind. It does live in your mind
Mm-hmm.
and negative thinking, but the root of it is your body is holding on to unresolved. So I knew that I needed to explore something that was going to help me move the energy in my system as much as in my mind, like a less mind focused, more body focused. And at that time, there were a couple of options, but one of the most powerful ones that I had learned about is something called EMDR, which
Mm-hmm.
stands for eye movement and reprocessing,
Mm-hmm.
which is a mouthful, but it does say what it does. It use the eyes or another form. There are many ways of doing it, but started out with just using the eyes, moving them back and forth in order to reprocess. So EMDR it's been around for a long time now. I think it was the 70s that it was developed, and it has grown and has been extremely useful in treating a variety of mental health concerns. A lot of the research has originally been done on PTSD specifically,
Mhm,
but essentially what it does, what makes it so amazing is that when we use this back and forth technique within therapy, whether it's moving the eyes or we do tapping, there's different ways of doing it. But the point is, you're activating different parts of the brain at the same time in an easy, accessible way,
mhm,
while focusing on something that's disturbing or distressing that normally we would not want to touch or we don't want to feel. It somehow allows us, similar to how meditation allows us, but this is, I find, more accessible for many of us. It allows the brain to start to process and digest. In other words, minimize the amount of distress that the body and mind are holding on to. Not minimizing it in a pushing it away, but in an actual digesting it kind of way. And we know that the beauty of this technique, it helps the brain create new neural pathways.
mhm,
And why is that helpful? Anything that's traumatic, the reason it's traumatic in the system is that it's been filed away. It's been stuck in time in our neural networks, in our brain, and in our nervous system, in our body. And it's not integrated, it's not talking to the other parts of us. For example, the part that knows that you're safe, right?
mhm,
And so the EMDR processing creates that conversation so that
mhm,
those stored parts, like literally stored in our brain, can start to be have a conversation with the more adaptive parts of you. And you don't even have to think about how to do that. It just happens naturally. And so it's applicable and helpful for so many different things because the mechanism is the same. So whether you're dealing with disordered eating or relationship struggle or attachment wounds, which pretty much all of us have, any kind of stress at work or in your body, if you're dealing with a health issue, anything where there's disturbing material that's hard
mhm,
to process, really beautiful tool. So this is why I have spent my career really learning the science and the art of using EMDR, and I teach other clinicians how to use it now. It's not the only framework I use, but it's probably the most foundational technique that I continue to use with my clients because I just love the transformational aspect that it has. And it's usually pretty fast.
And the fact that you don't have to talk about the problem.
Some people do say, do I have to say anything about it? It's like, to know a little bit so that I don't like.
Just because you want to bring the attention to it and flow that intention into trying to digest whatever you're going through.
And it helps the therapist. We need a context for what we're working with. So,
And
yes,
it would be, here's a trauma that I went through when I was 5 years old, and it makes me feel icky when I think about it. And that's when you begin the process of working with the individual on trying to digest and clear the relationship the person has with that trauma.
sometimes people come saying, this is the thing that I want to work on. This is the thing that happened. I don't want to feel that anymore. But a lot of times it's more like, this is the thing that's happening in my current day life. I'm having marriage issues, or I feel like my career's not going well, or I can't stop yelling at my kid, or something. And then we in the therapy can very quickly usually figure out where the roots of that are. And then we just clean it up. And then the thing that's happening in the day to day life becomes
Mhm,
less activated. So
mhm,
it's really, even though to some extent we go to history. And by the way, a person does not have to know all the details of what
mhm,
happened because the body knows. But,
mhm,
but we don't have to spend a ton of time in the past. Do I have to really go back there? Do I really have to
mhm.
spend all that time in the past and talk about when I was one and when I was two, when I was three? And it's
A lot of times you push it away and you don't want to even think about it. And I think your mind doesn't want to bring it back either.
exactly.
So that's comforting to know.
No,
What would you define? So again, trauma is a word that's loosely used
sure.
today. What do you define trauma as in your work? I want to expand because I had this confusion.
Yeah.
For me, trauma was you were physically abused, you were robbed, someone was killed in front of you, or you watched someone die. So it was extremely drastic in my mind as a definition of trauma. So a lot of the things that I went through in life, eventually, which I realized was actually also trauma, but not as high impact. And again, for all of those individuals who've actually gone through some very strong trauma, which could be physical, mental abuse, it could be people going through rape, people going through death, seeing people killed in front of them, caregiving. I don't want to minimize that at all. That's trauma on another level, but there's also the day to day trauma. And that's why it's important for me to ask this question because I had that confusion and I would often gaslight myself saying, look at you, you have an amazing life. What are you talking about? So I want the listeners to really understand what trauma is. And that's why I asked you that question so we can go deeper.
Such a great question. You explain it so well, how you've come to experience it. I grew up in a pretty loving home. It was a safe home. And in my adult years, when I was, why is my body carrying all this inflammation and stress and what is going on? It was shocking to me that there was so much unprocessed trauma in my system, even though I had not experienced what we might call big T trauma. You were describing big events like robberies or assaults or rape or death. Even if you've experienced a big T trauma, there are differences in how people process that on their own. So I can get it. But to answer your question, which is such a good one, little t trauma is this idea of something that's chronic, that happens over time, where there's basically too much of something or too little of something. Okay. So, too much stress in the home, parents fighting, or too much pressure, like some perfectionistic kind of experiences of stress, lots of pressure on kids, like kids who are high performing athletes or artists often experience that. But then the too little comes with it too, which is too little connection, too little acknowledgement, too little nurturing, too little acknowledgement of the experience, which is unique of that, in this case, child, because most of these are foundational experiences from childhood. So anything that's too much or too little that the body mind system hasn't integrated, hasn't made sense in a new way. It gets stuck in sort of our storytelling land about who we are, and then it never changes. I was working with someone the other day and she realized in our processing, she was like, even though she's a brilliant woman, she just has this negative belief that I'm not smart. Raise your hand if you're a woman who's raised to believe that she was dumb around money. It's just culturally we don't lift women up.
As a woman, you would never have a conversation with the family to talk about financial planning, for example. So
Right.
that's such a valid point you raise because that eventually leads to a belief that I'm not good enough to manage money.
And so how that can show up in an adult life, in this case, is this particular woman is going through a transition where she's becoming an entrepreneur. She's in a life transition that is asking her to get bigger, right? Asking her to step up in leadership for herself, asking her to learn new things, which we all know is uncomfortable. And so here is this nagging experience that she believes she's just fundamentally not smart. Like it's just a total illusion. But you and I know that a belief feels true in our body. And until we find some way to resolve that belief, and it's not enough to just say, I know that's not true.
Feel it in the
It's a
body.
felt sense, yes. And that's where this processing comes in. Within that session, we were able to turn that one around. And she and I have a working relationship. So the work gets faster and faster. But it was beautiful to see because it's just totally not true. Like she's just brilliant. And the other thing that might help listeners understand the difference is that when we have a stressful experience, we all know the feeling of your body going into fear, maybe going into, oh shit, whatever. And then sort of a time afterward where you have to recover from a stressful event. You might even get a cold and get knocked down for a few days. Our body can handle stress. It knows how to alchemize stress through our nervous system. And then, but the key here is if you had a stressful experience, okay, even if it's an ongoing one, and you can come out the other side with a coherent narrative about it, meaning
Mm,
talk about it in a way that the emotions match the timing of the experience. Say a car accident or something, you might still be like buzzing about it, right? But then, like, over time, a couple months go by, even a year goes by, and eventually you're like, that was a horrible experience, right?
mhm,
Charged in your body. That was awful, but now I'm okay. That's a natural recovery from stress, what's happening in their body. And actually,
mm,
finds it's the listener who experiences the emotions and the person who's telling the story does not anymore because
mm,
they were never validated and heard. So the emotion
mm,
way, so that shock lives deep in the system. The
mhm,
lives deep in the system. It's like it's been filed away, and they might talk about something like it's no big deal. And my dad was a complete alcoholic and he came home yelling every night.
mm.
Okay.
Right.
When you feel something in your own body when somebody's telling you something, that's trauma. And it's not that
Mm,
they're doing anything wrong and they're not dumb. It's actually a beautiful protective mechanism that
mm,
it simply says, all that information is very disturbing to my system. And I needed to just continue to live my life in a survival situation. And I was not able, I did not have the support at that time. I
mhm.
needed to really be with those emotions so that they could just move and alchemize on their own. The way that the other example I gave you of when stress eventually alchemizes through the system, it did not
Yes.
take place. So trauma gets more quiet throughout time, but it
Mm,
is insidious difficulty in our daily life, in our relationships, in our relationship with work, in our relationship with finances, children, whatever it may be. It shows up in the or behaviors that we don't like, addictions, sleep issues, health issues was one for me. So it's not, you're not wrong if you experience that. I want to really stress that for people. You didn't do anything bad. You're not doomed for life to walk around
mhm.
unprocessed emotion. It will cause struggle, right? Until you
And I think
have,
that's when you know that you have to reach out, right? It's with your day-to-day living that actually is giving you information
yes.
that something needs to be worked on. And like you said earlier, this is happening for me
Mm.
to look deeper and change something in me that has not been given the attention it needs. And that's where I think working with a therapist really helps. Thank you, Andrea. I think explaining the big T trauma and the small t trauma was helpful because we need to also stop gaslighting ourselves, right? And that's a new term I've learned, so I keep using it, which
Mm,
makes so
yeah,
much
same.
sense. It's basically how we keep telling ourselves, stop overthinking,
Mm,
don't focus too much on the thoughts that are coming up, the feelings that are coming up. Just ignore it. You grew up in a perfect home, beautiful connections, friendships, parents, right? But
yeah.
eventually, from what you said, is there could be one or two incidences or events as a child that could translate to something totally different as a belief for you growing up,
Mhm.
or too much of something or too little of something. I think that's another beautiful way of looking at life. So, did you not have enough connection with some members in your family and friends, and that meant a lot to you, but you didn't know how to express it back then? So, all of that leads to a certain belief system that then influences your today and just how you react. So when you do decide which modality to use with a client, like what's the process? How do you decide what modality you use? And we've spoken about EMDR, you touched upon Kundalini yoga. You spoke about internal family systems, which is basically a way of a person understanding this. There are many parts of me, the child in me, the adult in me, and the
Mhm.
adult wants to fix everything, but the
Mhm.
child and the teenager probably is really
Mhm.
fighting to fix anything, right? You just want to be that rebel. So When you work with a client, what is your process, Andrea? Like, how do you figure out which modality
Um,
works?
yeah, great question. I've been doing this for a long time, so I'm very intuitive about my work. So when I meet someone, what I'm really interested in is what is that person interested in having a bigger experience of? I care about my client's history, but from a clinical perspective, I'm not so focused on the details. I'm interested in who is this being sitting in front of me, and what is it that they are trying to experience more of in their life? Do they want a deeper connection with their spouse? Do they want to experience just more love and acceptance for themselves? Do they want more access to their creativity, like artistically or otherwise? Do they want to feel more confident at work in their leadership position? Do they want to? I'm really interested in what is it? Because there's a reason that you want to amplify something in your life. And it usually has to do with your destiny track or the thing that you're here to do. Otherwise, it wouldn't bother you so much. So I'm
And that's
interested.
doing a bit of a review, right? Like, why are you so bothered? Why is it impacting you? Because there's something bigger that you want to get to. I don't think I went from I'm earning $35,000 and I want to get to $5 million overnight. It's also how you shift your belief systems as you work through these modalities, right? Because it's these gateways and pathways that open, am I right? That slowly starts peeking into there's one layer of limiting belief, and then there's another, and then there's another, and you work through that during your therapy sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a journey because I don't know. Like when somebody sits down with me, I get a good sense of them, obviously. And there are some themes that we as humans struggle with. So I can usually find the thread pretty quickly. But at the same time, everybody is unique. So it is, you have to go through. There's no going over, there's no going under. There's a childhood song that I can't remember the name of right now, something about going on a lion hunt. Go over it, can't go under it, got to go through it. It's that concept, and I go through it with them. And we discover together what are the blocks or what is in other words, the illusions. They're really illusions, false realities that
Mm-hmm.
someone has developed in their psyche that is now limiting them from, or you could put it the other way, which is shining a light on what they want a bigger experience of, because it's always a polarity. Everything's in polarity here. That's the reality. That's this reality on this planet.
And so
Everything is
there could be days when you have small incremental changes
over.
through this work. I think over a period of time, you're going to look back and say, wow, I've come so far ahead.
Absolutely. And you don't always know how things are going to manifest in the 3D world once you start shifting your reality making machine. I really think that psychotherapy is the modern manifestation tool. And it's also the old school manifestation tool, aside from yoga, the real old schools. But in our modern era, psychotherapy has played the role of what we now call a manifestation process. And the reason is because the way you perceive the teaching is you are not what you project.
So that becomes your reality then.
Correct. So if you're
So
walking with limiting stories, or this client I was talking about who was just had this illusion that she was somehow not smart around money, think about how that's going to impact her life if she doesn't rework that.
yeah, and I think what I want to go a little deeper around what modalities you use and what is the difference. What
Oh
it's
yeah.
saying, depending on what the individual wants to achieve, I guess, during the journey of therapy, depending on that, you would decide what approach is best to take.
Yeah. So the most common psychotherapy model is a weekly ongoing model.
Mm,
This came with talk therapy, right?
mm,
Which is based on the idea that when you work with your thoughts and when you have a space to talk out your problems, you eventually come to some kind of positive, adaptive outlook. But as we
mm,
already talked about, I'm of the belief that in this new era, with everything kind of speeding up and with the amount of information that we have access to and the amount of pressure that it puts on our psyche
mm,
is
mm,
quite intense. And the teaching is it doesn't matter how much information you have, if you don't have a processing system at
mm.
adaptive enough to process that information. So I believe that EMDR, for example, as well as another technique called brain spotting, and there are others, but the mind body integration techniques that we now use in psychotherapy that go, so there's some talk therapy, and then there's these integration tools that we get to use. It's speeding up our ability to process the
Mm-hmm.
information. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very much, I think it's beautiful timing because we really, and it's not coincidental, we need these tools to be able to keep up in this time. And so I have moved into more of a short-term model with people as a result. I do more like 6 to 10 sessions, depending on that person and what it is they're trying to achieve and their situation and their trauma history and all of these particular factors. And we create a container together based on what it is they want a bigger experience of. And in that time together, which is usually once a week for those amount of weeks, we work on clearing the blocks and amplifying what they want. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in a more transformational experience in a shorter amount of time because I think that's how we are. I think it matches the energetics of the time that we're in. Now, some of those clients come back and we do more work together. Sometimes they call me once in a while, and that's great too. But my point is, it's a bit of a different model than it's an intensive model, which a lot of therapists are moving into now. There's nothing wrong with the weekly ongoing therapy, by the way. If anybody's doing that's amazing. It's a wonderful commitment to be making, and beautiful things can happen there. But for my makeup and my particular framework and my skill set, the short term model seems to be working better for both me and my clients at this time.
Hmm. Got
Does
it.
that
And
make sense?
yeah, that does answer my question, but that leads me to another question. So, what's the difference between psychotherapy, hypnosis, NLP? There are so many different types of therapy as well. So,
Yeah.
can you expand a little bit on those different types for our listeners to understand what would probably be the best thing for them?
Even in this new era, the number one factor that determines whether or not a client is getting a success in their treatment with a psychotherapist is still the quality of the relationship with the therapist.
Mm,
It's not the modality that they use. As much as I'm talking MDR up and down, and I will forever because I love it, um, you still, the number one thing you want to look for is a comfort level with the therapist. And that
mm,
has to do with what you need to feel regulated and to
right.
feel that connection. So, for anybody who's considering looking for therapy, first and foremost, be discerning about how do you feel with the person sitting in front of you, right? How safe do you
Mm,
feel with them? How much
mm,
do you feel like you can open up to them and share parts of yourself that might be challenging? How does that feel to you? You're going to have a transformational experience in that relationship dynamic. Okay. And then after that, I'm a bit biased. Like I said, I really like EMDR and it's so applicable to so many different things. But do your research and see what you feel called to. I really think our intuitive faculties are so wise. If you're a person who likes to look at information, that's great. But listen to your body too, because it will direct you in the right way.
awesome. And so now we're going to break down some misconceptions around therapy,
Okay.
Andrea. So this is more to make our listeners feel comfortable because there's a certain stigma that it still therapy still carries for many people.
Yeah.
Some, to be honest, I do think we are moving into an era where people feel more comfortable
Or-
to be more open to share that they're going through therapy and they are seeking support. But I do sense a little bit, even with different individuals I've worked, even in my personal life as well, where I've seen a lot of people feel brushing it off, saying it's unnecessary, it's a sign of weakness. Why do you have to seek support and help from someone else?
Mhm.
Um, and so, how do we change that? Because there's
Yeah.
so much resistance. And for me, as I work through my day to day, I see so much potential in people,
Yeah.
but a lot holds them back because they're not seeking the support that they need.
Yeah.
Uh, you see potential in people, but you realize that they're not living to their fullest potential because something's holding them back.
Mhm.
What dialogue can we have as a collective to make it okay to seek support and help?
Great question. It may not be the answer that you want, Shwetha. But I think it's about trusting that people are moving at their own time and pace. And there is a collective awakening going on, led primarily by women, but it's going to take time. And that's maybe a good thing. There's wisdom in that. I really think there are wonderful forces that know a lot more than I do about how this should all unfold. But I hear you that because you've been on this journey and you might be a little bit further ahead than some other folks in terms of your ability to relate to your internal world and then relate to the outer world as a result of that. And there is such a, and you sense in the benefit of spending that amount of time on figuring out how powerful that is. It could be frustrating when you know the power and you know the benefit.
I see so many people very close to me in my
Mm,
life that blame fate, circumstances, stars, without really taking ownership of their own healing
yeah,
and realizing that we all have the power to
yeah,
change our destiny.
yeah.
And so your answer is basically we
Yes.
do the work that one day influences the change around.
Exactly. And not everybody, let's just say that like therapy is not for everyone. It doesn't have to be for
Mhm,
there are many different ways of growing and learning and transforming. But I hear you about the kind of the insight that you have and because you're interested in creating a better world, you are also interested in everybody benefiting from the power that we have to heal. Just keep going on your own journey. It's hard, I know, but the only power you have is your own influential power, which is just comes from your being yourself and really seeing the best in other people. When you relate to their most capable selves, when you lift them up because you relate to that part of them,
mhm,
they relate to that part of them.
mm,
So that's a leadership tip. Relate to the best part of your staff or your team. It's not always easy to do, of course, because people are not always at their best. And that's just the reality. But Jesus was a healer, right? We know that people who came into his contact with him, according to the stories, some of them were miraculously healed. And one way I like to think about this story is that Jesus was such a high master and he was on such a high frequency that when he related to any of these individuals, he was only relating to their soul. Right? We're not all high masters, and that's okay. But isn't there something beautiful about that? That we
mm,
get to our influential power in seeing, not just seeing the best in somebody, but actually living with that person in that way,
mhm,
lifting them up in that way.
mhm.
That's leadership.
What would that conversation look like? For example, as a leader, you're dealing with a very difficult employee,
Mhm.
and you know that employee has the potential to really do the job well,
Yeah.
but the employee refuses to hear you, has made up
Mhm.
his or her mind
Mhm.
um, that this is what they want and this is what they're going to do, and they don't want to listen to anything else. So how would that dialogue look like if you're saying,
Yeah.
and for my listeners, right? Yes, Andrea brought up Jesus as an example, but this is in every faith.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you we're
Yeah. Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
specific examples that's been given down to us as
Mhm.
spiritual teachers and how
Mhm.
we embody that love and compassion to the other human soul by cutting through all the noise of the present day. And so, how would you say that conversation looks like?
Exactly. So, first of all, if I were in that posture, then I would, and if I noticed I was reacting negatively to that person, which is probably really understandable and easy to do. That's the dance, right? That's why there other people are mirrors. So I would invite that leader to just spend a short amount of time on their own, noticing what's coming up in them, right? And then learning how to be really with those emotions, how to name them. That's, by the way, one pro tip. Just a simple task of naming the emotion you're experiencing. I'm telling you, it sounds like maybe trivial, but it is so powerful to just that. Noticing your body. This is, and if you don't know, just ask your body, is this anger? Is this sadness? Very basic stuff, but really powerful. So I would invite that leader to just be really gentle with themselves, take
Mm,
space, be gentle with themselves, write down or notice what emotions are coming up in them. Don't block them. Just breathe through it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling, and eventually allow that to settle. And then
Mm-hmm.
try to access your compassion itself toward yourself first.
Mm.
Okay. Or towards someone that you know you can easily access to compassion toward.
So it's
Perhaps.
easy to mimic that emotion then.
Yeah. You want to access that compassionate place, which, by the way, we know from brain imaging that when we experience compassion, either from someone or
Mm-hmm.
from ourselves, it's a felt sense. Compassion is a felt
Mm-hmm.
sense. It's the only time that this certain area just underneath the frontal lobe back here lights up. And it's a
Mm.
very fundamental spot within the brain because it connects with our frontal lobe, which is our adult brain.
Mm-hmm.
And it just creates a little bit of magic in our brain. So I like people to have a visual that compassion is a place. It's a
Mm.
place as well as a felt sense. And so if you can access that or something close to it, then move from that place and think about how do you want that next conversation to go with that individual, with that part of you online again.
Right.
And if it doesn't work the first time, don't get discouraged because these
Mm.
things are hard. Human relationships are very challenging. So
Yes.
that would be the practice I would invite a leader to take. And then again, similar to how we were talking about the women earlier on, that you can't always see the solutions. You can't always access that more creative frontal lobe part of you when you're in a
Mm.
lower state of emotional,
Mm-hmm.
when you're in another room, right, of frustration and rage, which is, again, not wrong to feel those things. But until you find a way to move rooms, you're just going to
Mm.
relate to that person from that energy and you're going to
Mm.
amplify that energy. And before
Right.
you know it, things are falling apart. Again, this is where true leadership comes in. It doesn't mean it's easy and it doesn't mean
Mm.
you're perfect, but can you practice switching rooms? Happens when you relate to that person, this frustrating or difficult person, which, by the way, is a person in pain. It's the only reason somebody is difficult ever. How do you relate to them from that place in you? And who knows
And
what that.
sometimes you can't really tell what pain it is because that person has not done the work. And it's not a win-win situation at that point. And it's okay to be in those situations in that position too. I think again, part of the pressure of being a leader in today's world is
Yeah,
outcomes, outcomes, outcomes. What's
yeah,
the result? How can you bring forward an outcome? But it limits the leader's potential too,
yeah,
because he or she is having to deal with different parts of what an employee is going through as well,
totally, totally.
right? And so I think collectively, as we begin to do this work, there will that compassion will come forward. And by the way, I remember a few years ago, and this was probably 10, 12 years ago, someone just walking by told me, you need to be a bit more compassionate to yourself. And Andrea, I swear, and I'm going to probably embarrass myself by openly admitting this, I didn't know what it meant to be compassionate.
I think that's very understandable.
I literally had to Google what does it mean to
Uh-huh,
yourself. And even
uh-huh,
at that point, I don't think I integrated the meaning because I didn't know how. So I went home and I said, oh, I love you, I love you. But I
uh-huh,
wouldn't feel it, right?
uh-huh. Yeah,
And then at one point, I'm like, am I crazy? Like, what am I doing here? Until I really started then going on this journey of
oh, yeah,
self-healing and trying to understand why are there parts of me that shut off to compassion? Where does it stem from?
yeah.
So it's okay, and this is giving my listeners permission that
Uh-huh,
it's okay to not know the meaning of compassion, and
totally.
it's okay to not know how all of this impacts our body and our brain, but I'm hoping that this episode is a beginning of your healing journey where you feel a little curious on how can I dig deeper to find that compassion for myself, and you begin that journey on your end. This has been so amazing, Andrea.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today and your compassion with us.
Yeah.
It definitely showed up in every conversation we had, and your patience. I know our listeners are walking away with not only deeper understanding of therapy, but also some simple practices that they can start using, which is breath work, like you said. And that's a quick 5-minute stay in your own room breath work that you can focus on that brings you into a state of being and noticing what your body feels. And I think giving yourself permission to, when you're going through something not easy or comfortable, just go into your body. What does this make me feel? And giving yourself permission to actually pause. And I think that in itself is such a strong tool for people to start building that awareness. And remember, you don't have to figure everything out on your own. Sometimes the bravest step is actually reaching out for support. And this is just the beginning. As I said earlier, Andrea is going to be here back on our podcast a lot more. We're going to have a very good discussion in part two on where we'll look at life's most profound experience, which is grief. We'll explore how to navigate grief with day to day issues and things that happen, and what it means to stay connected with loved ones after they've passed, and how to find meaning in loss. And so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that powerful conversation. And until next time, remember clarity is within your reach, one step at a time, and reach out for support if you're not able to get that.
Yes. Thank you, Shwetha. That's such a beautiful conclusion. This was so fun. I can't wait to talk to you again. And your listeners are in for such good stuff. Like, you're just so brilliant and you're so insightful. This is a great podcast. And for people who do want a little bit of goodies, I come bearing gifts. They can go to andreaskitch.com//gifts. And I will have two very accessible tools for you. One is a 5-minute journal prompt when you have a distressing emotion that you want to be able to find that comfort with. So it will help you on that journey if you're having a difficult moment. And the second one is a meditation. Your listeners are very welcome to go grab those at andreaskitch.com/gifts. And I can't wait to talk to you again, Shwetha.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrea. And do leave comments below on what you learned today. And of course, once you access the gifts that Andrea so generously offered, do book a session as well. She's amazing. Thank you again, Andrea.
Welcome.